Welcome to Aircrew Interview. I'm Mike, your host. In this episode, we chat to former Australian F-18 Hornet pilot Matt Hall. In part 1, Matt chats about his initial flying training, getting selected for the Hornet, the role of the aircraft with the RAAF, his flying training, DACT, and much more. So if you like what we do here and would like to support the channel while getting early and extra content, you can do this by donating monthly at patreon.com/aircrewinterview. Thank you and enjoy. So Matt, when did you first become interested in aviation?
Oh, it was when I was just a little fella, actually. My granddad and dad were both pilots, so I spent, ever since I was basically able to walk, I was hanging around at airfields with my dad going flying. So from a very young age, like a lot of pilots, from a young age hanging around their dad at an airport.
Yeah, so what year did you actually join the Air Force?
Joined the Air Force in 1991, January of 1991. In fact, it was the day I joined, the day that the first Gulf War started. I was doing in the recruiting process, and they came in and said, "Hey, just so you all know that America just went in and tried to liberate Kuwait, and there's shots fired, and welcome to the Air Force." It's like, ooh.
So you'll never forget that day, then?
No, not at all.
So yeah, can you talk us through some of the basic aircraft you started training on?
So the first plane that I started training on in the Air Force was called a CT-4. Actually, it's from down this way. Originally designed in Australia, and then the rights were sold off to New Zealand. Then Australia bought them back. But it's just a little continental side-by-side trainer, very much like a lot of the trainers from 30 years ago. Aerobatic, big bubble canopy, and we did about 60 hours on that, and then went to that was at number 1 flying training school. Then number 2 flying training school was on the PC-9, which most people will be familiar with, the PC-9, and that was the aircraft that you got your wings on, and then from there you got streamed into fighters or transport, all that sort of stuff.
Mm-hmm. So obviously you got streamed into fighters, because I want to talk about the Hornets. So what were your first thoughts on the aircraft?
Beautiful plane. It's a magic aircraft, the Hornet. I'd seen it in air shows, and when I was growing up and all that sort of stuff, and it's just one of those things that it was a new aircraft back then as well, and it was just. I think it's a beautiful looking aircraft, the Hornet. It looks amazing. And then the first flight I had in a Hornet was just a backseat passenger flight while I was waiting to go onto my conversion. So the 2-seaters just throw young pilots in the back seat just to go on the rides. Mm-hmm. And what struck me in the first flight was that the power lever was. In all the flying I'd done previously, in the CT-4s and then the PC-9, then the Mackie, the 326 Mackie, was you push the power up and the noise increases, and then you watch the airspeed indicator move. Whereas at the Hornet, you move the power lever, and it was basically an acceleration lever. It wasn't a noise lever, because you can't hear the engines, they're behind you. So it's just aircon. But if you push the power up, it's just like poof, like that, instantaneous. So your body would move instantaneously with the throttles. And that was the first thing that struck me as the Hornet, was that like all modern fighters, is that the throttle, you're controlling up to 50,000 pounds of thrust with this much movement of the throttle. So there's a huge amount of power going in and out of what's relatively light, 1-to-1 power to weight ratio aircraft. You really feel that kicking in.
Mm-hmm. And was the Hornet the aircraft you wanted to go on to, or did you fancy the F-111?
No, it's definitely the Hornet. I was offered the F-111, and I chose the Hornet. I'd always seen myself as more of a fighter pilot, single cockpit sort of stuff. I grew up flying aircraft, and my favorite aircraft to fly until I joined the Air Force was a Pawnee, which a single seat crop duster towing gliders, and I just loved being on my own in that aircraft, and I flew single seat gliders, and the thought of flying a single seat fighter was just I loved Mustangs and Spitfires, and it was where I was going. A bubble canopy, single seat, and rolling around the sky. The sky's a playground. Whereas the F-111, I've flown the F-111, just on a flight. Amazing plane, but it is a bomber. It's a big, heavy aircraft. Whereas the F-18s, it's just the world is your oyster when you're flying an F-18.
That was great. You actually got offered both aircraft as well. That must have been pretty cool.
Yeah, it was in a period of time where there were spots on both types. So yeah, I was offered the F-111, and in fact I had to turn down an acceleration of courses. So they were basically, hey, we'll put you on this course, and then you can go straight on with the F-111 as a very young guy, because there's a spot there right now for you to go on. And I turned that down and went into a holding pattern for a year to wait for a slot on the Hornet, because they had a backlog of people going onto the Hornet, but they were needing people to go on the F-111. So I actually turned down the slot and waited for another year to get my go on the F-18.
So yeah, what was the actual role of the Hornet with the Australian Air Force at this time?
So we've always held the Hornet as a multi-role, which was its original design, but obviously land-based. So it's not even set up for carrier operations. The launch bar's been removed off the nose gear, but it's multi-role. So it's interdiction, it's close air support. All of the air-to-ground type things, but it's then also air superiority, so setting up combat air patrols, escorting the F-111s into the target area, all of the above, which then came to seed missions, kill box missions in more modern times.
So what kind of flying training would you be conducting before you got put onto your frontline squadron?
Yeah, you go through a 6-month training course on the F-18, which is called Operation Conversion, OPCON for short. And then there's 3 phases to that. The first phase is learning how to fly the aircraft. So pretty much being able to fly it daytime, nighttime, good weather, bad weather, in close formation and in tactical formation with a wingman. Because if you can't do that, there's no point going on to the other bits and pieces. That's when you get your instrument rating on the aircraft. I think it's your 3rd flight's your first solo, and then about your 6th flight is your instrument rating test, right. And then you do another 5 flights of consolidation, including formation, and then hey, you convert it on the aircraft. You can now fly a Hornet. There's a joke that you're now a Hornet pilot, but you're not a fighter pilot. You then go on to the next phase, which is air-to-air phase. And air-to-air phase starts with the basics and builds up. And the basics of air-to-air is basic fighter maneuvers. B is the basic part. BFM, that's dogfighting. So learning how to do 1v1 dogfighting. So just going out there, the student in one aircraft with the instructor in his backseat and another instructor in the other aircraft, and learning how to do offensive fighter work, how to do defensive fighter work, how to do neutral BFM, then into what we call ACM, air combat maneuvering, which is 2v1, so 2 guys maneuvering against 1 bad guy, and how to coordinate that. And then you move into the intercepts, which is 1v1 intercepts, long range, out at 60 miles, running in, shooting long range weapons at each other, converting into BFM, daytime, nighttime, IMC, and then into 2v2s. So you're now maneuvering with a wingman, and then you'll have a look at doing 4v4s and air-to-air gunnery. That's the end of air-to-air phase, and it's basically an exposure and be safe. That's all they're looking for in that time. Exposing you to the role and making sure that you're safe. You don't go blind all the time. You're not trying to run into your lead all the time. You're not shooting your lead instead of the bad guy, all that sort of stuff. You then move into the final phase, which is air-to-ground phase, which is employing air-to-ground weapons. So once again, starts with the basics, which is application bombing, going round and around the pattern, dropping practice bombs on a target, in all angles, 10 degree, 30 degree, 45 degree, high drag, low drag weapons, radar offset weapons, and then pop-up attacks. So rather than just going around and around, running in at low level, pulling up, diving, attacking, threat defending off target areas, and then you look at how to use those skills as the culmination, which is close air support with a wingman, attacking things on the ground near army personnel on the ground. Interdiction, long-range strike, going in with a 2-ship or a 4-ship with guys trying to attack you, where you have to do air-to-air work, run in, drop your bombs, turn around, come back, fight your way out, air-to-air, and then go home. And then finally, dropping live weapons. So practice bombs are live weapons in the fact they come off the aircraft, but they don't do a lot of damage. They just have white phosphorus, a little puff of smoke. We drop high explosives, HE, as the final couple of missions, because that's where the pressure is. You can kill someone now. And you've got to be able to make the decision to drop the bomb on the right spot and where the consequences of it being correct. And that's where you've got to have the confidence to do that. Otherwise, you're not going to be any good as a fighter pilot. So that's the graduation mission. That's a 6-month period. After that, you go to the squadron and realise you know nothing, and you spend the next number of years learning how to do it properly.
Yeah, it's a lot to take in for 6 months, isn't it? Wow. But let's talk about the strengths and weaknesses of the aircraft. If you can explain that to our viewers.
Oh, the Hornet. It's got a lot of strengths. It's probably one of the tightest turning aircraft out there. It can really turn tightly in dogfights. So everyone's always scared of a Hornet in a dogfight because it really turns really tightly. The weakness, it does have quite a few weaknesses, to tell you the truth. Weaknesses is its payload. It doesn't carry a great deal. We're talking classic Hornet is what I flew. It doesn't go that fast, so it's not a fast fighter. Yes, you can fly it supersonic, but it won't supercruise. You've got to be using a lot of fuel to be supersonic. And if you are supersonic using a lot of fuel, it doesn't carry a lot of fuel in the first place to do that. And the last thing I'd say is its engines were never big enough. But I don't think you'd ever find a fighter pilot who says this plane's got too much power. So for me, I was always frustrated that I just wish I had a little bit more power in a dogfight, so I could really capitalise on the turning performance of the aircraft. Whereas if you're fighting a wide mouth Viper or a big engine F-15 like a GE 129 F-15, if you didn't kill it in the first bit by using your nose authority, they were then going to march away from you and come around and kick your bum, because even though their turn circle was heaps bigger, they just had so much power they could just keep motoring and motoring, where you'd be running out of power in an F-18.
Mm-hmm. So I'm thinking it was the Australians, they had the A model, didn't they? Is that correct?
That's correct. The A model and the B model for training. And then we upgraded the aircraft through its life to effectively make it the same capability as the C's and the D's anyway.
Yes, because I want to talk about the cockpit. Was it a comfortable environment?
It's a. I never had any problems with it. It can get hot, but it's a modern cockpit. It's a glass cockpit. It was one of the first full glass cockpit aircraft out there. It was all HOTAS. It was a small cockpit, not as small as a Viper, but much smaller than the F-15, because I flew the F-15 for a number of years as well. But it was a very well organised cockpit. The air conditioning was great. It was a nice plane to be seated in. Everyone gets a bit of a sore back from flying fighters, just because you're generally sitting quite upright. The F-16 not so much, but the F-18 you're definitely sitting very upright, that's really for ejection purposes. If you have to eject, you need to be sitting in an very upright position. But what that means is that you're always getting lower lumbar issues because you're leaning forward all the time. You're almost hunched over. And the stick was a reasonably heavy stick. The fly-by-wire, but it had a lot of springs in it. So when you pulled back hard on the G, you'd also be pulling yourself forwards in that sitting position, which would then give you some lower back issues. So you find most F-18 pilots have got some sort of lower back and possibly neck issues from the BFM.
And you mentioned it just briefly earlier, but I want to talk about DACT in the Hornet. How did it fare against, like you kind of briefly mentioned, the F-15s, the F-16s? Did you fly against the Brits even?
Yeah, so I did a lot of DACT with the F-18. It's like all things, it comes down to the operator. There's times where, a lowly hawk can get in the mix and create a whole heap of damage against some poorly operated F-18s. I've got to admit, for the long range interdiction stuff, you never wanted to come up against a Block 50 Viper simulating a Sukhoi or something like that with simulating some long range weapons. There's scary things. I remember specifically from when I was doing my fighter weapons course. Our version of Top Gun, this FCI course. That we were loaded up, big time loaded up with a lot of weapons, and the jet's struggling even at 30,000 feet, and we had Vipers out there as adversary. And I remember I was leading the foreship, trying to go somewhere with bombs on and tanks on and all sorts of stuff, and then our radars aren't even seeing it because the Viper's so small, but off the distance there's 4 contrails just screaming at us. And finally we get contact on their radars. They're doing Mach 2 at like 55,000 feet, and it's like, this is going to be impossible because they can throw big long weapons at that height and that speed. So we threw a few weapons out. We aborted because we're using AMRAAMs. We aborted to let those launch and leave tactics try and disrupt them. I think they absorbed a shot or two, and then there's still 2 Vipers just chasing us down. We're doing 0.9, running away bravely, and they're doing Mach 2, coming screaming down the hill. It's like, well, you can't run away from that, so you have to turn around and merge with them, and then they come blitzing through the merge, like doing Mach 2, and you can't even turn with them now because by the time you turn to shoot them, they're gone. It's like, so there's those limitations you have with an F-18 that was, as I say, a slow fighter. But if you ended up having to merge with somebody, or you had to do a visual engagement, or you ended up on the deck having to jink against a weapon system. So the Hornet's very, very survivable aircraft against a surface-to-air threat. It's a fantastic aircraft in that regard. So it just depends on what your role is and who you're fighting and what they're doing with their aircraft. And say a Hawk can ruin your day, but I could go out there against F-16s and F-15s all day if I was in the right mindset and I had the correct role that I was trying to achieve.
Mm-hmm. And did you work with 111s much?
Yep, spent a lot of time working with them. That was part of one of my roles, was to escort F-111s, because if Australia was ever going to use the F-111s, guess what? They're going to have us escorting them in and out of the target area. So it was a reasonably large part of my job, was developing tactics and training with those tactics for escorting and supporting F-111s. And typically what that would involve is, you'd clear a path and put pickets up with jets to set up caps and put what we call a TAR cap, a target combat air patrol, overhead the target area, and then have the F-111 run in. If you could, you'd keep them at medium altitude, out of the low-level threat environment, and have them run in supersonic, do their weapon work while we sat around, keeping the threats at bay, and then you'd get them to just light their burners and just run out at Mach 2 and just like go, and then we would then come up behind them, just shooting everyone off the tail and take ourselves back out of the target area. So it was always a big, complex system. The F-111 was primarily designed to try and go in unescorted, was their plan originally when it was designed back in the late 60s, early 70s. It was a low-level night strike platform that went in as a single ship, unaided. But through the 80s and the 90s, it was proven that when you got MiGs out there and Sukhois, that you can't just send an F-111 on its own. You've got to have support for it, and that was our job, was to support it in and out of the target area.
I bet there was some great banter between the Hornet guys and the F-111 guys.
Yeah.
But
what do you call it? You did call it a B-111, didn't you? Because the F's incorrect.
Yes. We'll call it a B-111, yeah. But we'll move on from that, Matt. But did you ever fly the Hornets on live operations?
No, I didn't. I didn't fly the Hornet on live ops. So obviously I did live. Well, I did, but not combat ops. So I did operations in it, but I didn't deploy any weapons or anything like that. It was more combat air patrols for major political events and things like that, to make sure that there was nothing went wrong. So we'll just eye in the sky. No one even knew we were there, sort of thing. But with live weapons and authority to shoot if things went bad. But I didn't do any combat operations in the F-18.
Mm-hmm. Well, did you fly on any, or did you get invited on any live big exercises like Red Flag or anything like that?
Yes, I did quite a few big exercises in the Hornet. So, which is in the northern end of Australia and the east coast of Australia, always large exercises. Your pitch blacks and your Aces North and Arnhem Thunders. Then Cope Thunders up in the Asian, Southeast Asia sort of area. So up in Indonesia and in Thailand, in Singapore and Malaysia, and then did exercises in the US as well. And this is all just on the Hornet. That was actually a Cope Thunder, I believe it was, up in Alaska, operating out of Eielson Air Force Base. And those sort of operations. I didn't do a red flag in the F-18. But I spent a reasonable amount of time in Nellis in other aircraft.
And I'm sure you have plenty, but have you got maybe a couple of stories that stick out in your mind from flying the Hornet that you can share with our viewers?
Oh, yeah. What sort of story are you looking for?
Anything that you think is a good story for our viewers. I'll let you pick, man.
Okay. There's a lot of them. Let's see. There was one. So I was in Darwin and I was doing some DACT, so dissimilar air combat tactics, with two F-16s. It was 1v2 ACM, so air combat manoeuvring, so visual manoeuvring. So I was on my own in a Hornet, and I had two F-16s who were trying to manoeuvre together to kill me, and I was trying to be on my own to kill them. So we're manoeuvring away. And then I had Betty, Deedle, Betty, who's our the voice in the cockpit with us. She says, engine left. And I look down, it's got left engine flame out and left engine's rolling back. And I've actually flamed out an engine. And I'm like, oh, that's not good. So I unload. I was a high alpha at the time trying to gun an F-16. And I'm like, whoa. So I unload the aircraft because often you'll flame the engine out, Not often you'll flame the engine out. Often, if the engine has flamed out, it's because of high angle of attack and disrupted airflow in through the intake. So I unload the aircraft at the same time, retarding the left throttle and called knock it off. I've had a flame out. And then there's like this eruption of adrenaline on the radio with the two Vipers going, Roger, we're at 16,000 feet. Home base is at 12 miles. We've got a glide ratio of this. Mayday. I'm like, whoa, guys, it's all right. I've still got another engine left. It's all good. It's all good. So, just get these Viper guys that if they hear flame out, that's like, boom, we're going to have to eject. So it's like, so good, dude. I'm going to go home now and have a cup of coffee. You guys stay out here and play.
That's brilliant. So how many hours did you manage to get on the Hornet, Matt?
I ended up with about 2,000 hours on the F-18. So which is about 10 years of flying them. Like I said, it's about 10 years. Yeah, so you generally average about 200 hours a year. It just doesn't sound like a lot, but they're pretty high quality hours, especially when you're doing the BFM. Because they're only 0.5s. Averaging 3 to 4 hours a week is about right for a Hornet.